Great. So we saw how Jug was helping Kyra with humor and with a conversation, creating a comfortable environment. He was
Metaphors.
helping her feel lighter. Metaphors. He was explaining things to her about her own life and her own decisions, giving her a new perspective. And I think what we see in the movie is that as she's sort of freeing herself up in a way, she's able to dig deep and sort of, to use this physical analogy, she's able to dig deep and pull out the issue, the real core issue that is at the heart of everything, and which is a period of 1 year. And we are shown as a viewer the period of 1 year where her parents had to leave her at her grandparents' house because
Mm,
they were going to a different country
mm,
to set up a business and they couldn't take her.
mm,
And that was a period where she felt really abandoned. She wrote a lot of letters to her mother asking her to take her back, and there was no response. And then she discovers that her mother comes back home with a baby brother,
mhm,
and she again feels jealous, and
mhm,
she overhears her mother, and this is when she's 6 years old.
mm,
She overhears her mother telling her grandfather that I don't reply to her letters because I don't want to give her false hope. I
mm,
can't manage two children in a foreign country.
mm,
And uh, she takes a decision as a 6 year old, a small 6 year old, that
mm,
uh, somewhere it seems to be her fault.
mm,
She seems to think that you know she is the reason that her parents are not taking her to their place, and then she tells herself that I will, from now on, I won't ask anything of my mom and dad, and I won't expect anything. So how significant do you think that is in a person's life, that kind of trauma? And talk to me a little bit about this whole dynamic, this child parent child dynamic that happens in a young age, and how that can actually create a lasting impact. And it's also kind of a sacred ground, right, where we don't really want to go into and start looking objectively at our childhoods because we feel that it's some kind of a sacred ground that we are not supposed to question.
yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about those aspects.
Look, family dynamics is what all of counseling is based upon, right? The whole framework of counseling sits upon family dynamics, and what makes it so interesting that there's so many people, so many different branches and ways of dealing with family dynamics that have cropped up is because it's complex. It's because there's two human beings trying to respond to each other, and a child trying to, think about controlling her future by communicating with the parents, right? And parents treating the child as if the needs are different to what the child's needs are, and that can happen to anyone at any point in time, right? A adult, a fully grown adult, ambitious, a successful adult, can feel like a child at any given moment in time if they come across a person who does not meet their needs. That can be triggered. So the question here is not about, what we how do we stop trauma from happening, right? This is not an indication for parents, to tell parents that, oh my god, you can't leave your children ever with the grandparents and go away because your child are going to experience abandonment. This is about communication. This is about,
Mm.
sitting with the child and understanding the needs around why was she writing a letter, right? She
Yeah.
wanted to feel the connection with the parents. You know, she, they, she was surprised when they came back with another child. She was not expecting that, right? So her expectations were not met. So
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the trauma that causes issues for, for children in adulthood. It is actually how parents respond to that when the children express it in the way
Mm.
that they do. So I think, parents these days really need to be a lot more aware, and,
Mm.
before they move into the phase of trying to fix a problem, right? And that's what happens with
Yeah.
with parents a lot of the time.
Yeah, and in this movie, you see that parents are the parents there are not really aware. I mean, they're a bit confused, and they're shown as being a little confused, and they're wondering, what's happening. Why is this? Why is my daughter not connecting with
So
me,
they're
and why is
they're seeing
she?
their symptoms.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
that's right.
they're focusing on symptoms of being, of her being a bit of a defiant daughter, her being someone who, who is that 1% who doesn't want to get married, just being difficult, whatnot, but they don't see the connection between, what how she's responding to them currently, because now, as an adult, she feels like she's got a lot more control, so she can express her emotions, but unfortunately she's expressing it coming out of anger, where she has that you know that meltdown in front of her family
Yeah,
members when they start to continuously being critical of her, so to speak.
yeah. And then there's that a kind of a eureka moment between the therapist and hey Vinay, I just need to pause just for a second. Yeah,
Sure.
uh, just sorry, one second.
It's okay. All right. You're good.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the eureka
So
moment.
the eureka moment. So there was a eureka moment between Kyra and Jug, where Kyra sort of recounts this whole thing. What happened to her during how she felt and how her parents reacted, how she felt, and she really literally breaks down there. And then that is I think a great moment in that equation between the therapist and her. And talk to me a little bit about those moments, because of course in the movie they show, and it's a movie, so in a way you have to show that the person is has experienced that moment. She's sort of figured out, everything now starts to make sense as to why she is the way she is. Like she's sort of always running away from things and people, because she feels that that abandonment will follow her where with respect to all her relationships. So she ends up breaking up with people before she feels they break up with them, and all of that. uh, Sometimes, when you live for 20, 30, 40 years or more with a certain way of thinking that you've carried along, and you have this eureka moment, in reality I assume it can be quite unsettling. And you're virtually, it's like you're naked out there in the world again, and you're like, it's like you're reborn, right? That's what I felt when I saw that. I thought the movie was sort of gave it a more positive view. But in your experience, have you seen that when people are faced with the actual reality of what the problem is, how do they react to that? Like, how tough is it, or how easy is it?
Look, her, there's obviously the running joke in counseling school is that, if you're able to make a client cry, you've given yourself a star or whatnot, right? You've achieved your goal. That's a joke, so to speak. But
Yeah,
it is an emotional response. So, a person sobbing in your presence as a therapist, you see that as some form of a release, and that it is
mm,
just one of the stages of release. So what we see in this movie shown, really in a compressed manner, is the relationship changing and the discussion topics changing and moving from, something external to something more vulnerable. And she's,
yeah,
it is often possible in a therapy session that a client walks away from a session and then goes away and does something drastic, like her having a, meltdown in front of her parents, or having a, release, again an emotional release in front of her parents, knowing sometimes that next day I'm going to a counselor and be able to talk about this. So people often
mm,
do that
mm,
because they use that as an opportunity to piggyback
right,
on each other. So it's important that, when I'm sitting in front of someone as a
mm,
counselor, and if they have an aha moment where they start to realize why the patterns in their life currently are
right,
representative of what happened in the past. Usually it is a 17 to 18 session. uh, you know, what do you call it? It has to go through about 17 to 18 sessions before people can actually have that aha moment. And that's where counselors use different tools, different therapy styles, different approaches, different instruments, whatnot, to to get to that point. But it is something that counselors are aware of. So what they do is they they try to build a sense of support network around the person. Who would the person be communicating with? Because the counselors understand that they're working in a controlled environment where this person is sitting in front of a counselor and there's no one else around you. There's no phones, there's no social media, there's no, people being critical of you and whatnot. Because all of those societal things can trigger what's been happened. Right. So it is,
right,
it's a it's something that counselors will will preface and also bookend at the same time to make sure that clients feel supported through that process. And there'll be some measures put in place to see, okay, if you feel something coming up all of a sudden while you're out there, right, you notice something, and then all of a sudden you start to realize why you used to do the things that you do. You have another aha moment when you don't have a counselor, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to call someone? Are you going to write something down? But definitely come back and process it. So it's important that
Yeah.
people don't go back into their judging mode. And that's what
Mm.
she's doing. She's becoming more experimental with her life and a bit more flexible with her thinking, rather than trying to put everyone into a box, including herself.
Yeah. And in the end, I think her kind of a last exchange that she has with Jug, and I think she's through this process developing some feelings for him, obviously because she's probably not met someone like him who's really understood her. And I think in the last session, he kind of shocks her to say that uh, the next session is going to be our last session. She was not expecting that, and when she talks to him, she says that I like you and I really like you, and he tells her that I'm sorry, but I can't. I like you too, but I can't get involved with you here. And our journey needs to stop here. And genius is knowing. And she asks him that what do I do if I have another problem? Like who do I go to? And he tells her genius is knowing when to stop. So we've spoken about seeking help and going through this process, but the question is, when do you stop? I guess that's what I wanted to ask.
When do you stop therapy?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it transitions. More so than stopping, it
Mm.
has to transition towards a stop. It's like a book. You start the book, you get interesting, and it then reaches some form of a climax, and then it has to come to a soft close. Sometimes it's just an open close where a counselor will transition you. But I like how she talked about her feelings with her counselor, because that sometimes can again make things fester on for people can
Mm.
continuously worry about those things, especially. So yeah, it is it's an indication that she was not fearful of being vulnerable. I think that's what the director was trying to get across in front of a counselor who could actually reject her and say no, because that's what she faced. She
Yeah.
faced rejection right after she experienced
Mm.
vulnerability, right? But it was
Yeah.
in a safe space where she could actually explore it. And there was another, phrase that he used earlier on as well, which said, "Don't let your past blackmail your present to rob you of your beautiful future." Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That was a
And
great line. Yeah.
I think that kind of sums it up. And usually that's the point that you want to be in counseling, when you start to realize, when you start to connect to that quote there, not when you have been diagnosed with a mental health issue and whatnot. And that can,
Yeah.
that people know, when they start to notice how their relationship with others are happening. But yeah, it is
Yeah.
the closure aspect of it. It takes a while, and in this movie, because of the limitation on time, it's been shown really quickly. And she has a cry outside the gate, which again gives her a sense of closure again as well. Again, that emotional release.
Yeah. And then she's sort of open enough, brave enough to feel it and not suppress it, and not and to understand it and let it out and be done with it. I think that was in a way Jug's victory. And he even tells her in that last session that I'm so happy that you told me what you feel about me, even though I'm not reciprocating it. You were able to tell me, and you were able to sort of process it in the way that I wanted you to.
So it comes back to the whole concept of self acceptance again, right? So she can
Yeah.
accept that she's having these feelings, she can share it, and then the outcome is not really in her control. She starts to realize that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other aspect of this movie is that it's not that at the end of that, Kyra is a superwoman. I think she goes back to living her life, but she probably does it with a better understanding of herself, which I feel is what you can expect from seeking help.
So you can see her go and create a movie that is in line with her values, about a person who is searching for their own identity, and being
Mm.
living behind a mask, but then opening up. So and that's what happens when we start to live with a version ourselves that we can accept, we start to produce work or have relationships that are meaningful, that are fruitful, that seem, even though they seem vulnerable, they are, they're authentic. And that's why, people around them, you stand them seeing and clapping. It's not because, yeah, she's done a first production. It's because she's created something that's genuine and authentic, and people around her know that it is the true essence of who she is as a person. She's grounded in herself.
Yeah, and thanks so much for those insights, Vinay. And lastly, listeners, whoever is tuning in, what would you say? Would you leave us with a few words of direction or advice on seeking help? Because I'm sure that in all facets of our life, in our work life, in our personal life, we do face challenges. We are observing behaviors. First, might be brave enough, open enough to go ahead and resolve those. So, what would your advice be to our listeners on mental health and on seeking help
Yeah.
based on your experience?
Look, my advice is going to seem a little bit out there because I've been living in Australia, but every individual across the world is able to do this, right? So, my profound learning from studying counseling is that any one of us is able to learn how we can, communicate with others. So for people thinking about therapy, right? Think about how you're going to use therapy to benefit different areas in your life, to find appreciation in others, to be more accepting of yourselves, to be more accepting of others, and how to listen more, and often not just, talk and find solutions for others. Because this, if I'm not, this is by no means, how a real therapy, what do you call, discussion would happen, right? So, there are aspects of therapy and the person going through change that have been, um, glamorized for the sake of the movie. So, that's not the point. The point is that, anyone can take on a role that SRK was playing, using humor, using non-judgmental, an approach, not to, telling them it's okay to cry, not, not just jumping in and giving them a hug when, when they look like they're upset, but just being alongside them so that a person can accept themselves. And I think sometimes when we don't have a person like around them, going to seek therapy is good, but trying to, constantly tell ourselves that I'm okay, I can fix this
Yeah,
myself. We wouldn't do that if we had a broken hand, right? We wouldn't just
no,
hold a hand
no,
there and say, I'm going to be okay in 40 days. We don't do that. We go and get expert help. So it's always a good idea to go and get someone, but get someone who has some of those emulations of therapies that you saw in the movie.
yeah. And before I let you go, just like we try out things, just like using the analogy of the chair, you try things out. Is it also plausible to assume that when you seek out a therapist, that you try therapists and see who works for you? Do you see that happening as well in the field?
I would love for people to, go and talk to a person who, might have seen a therapist. Ask them for their experience first before you go and see one yourself, just like how the actress did in the movie, right? Because, you that
Right.
her assistant who went and saw the therapist, he wouldn't have gone there thinking that, quote, he would have become wiser after having a discussion with a therapist, after running through some of the thoughts. So it's a, it's a definite, it's easier word of mouth for you to walk in there and be vulnerable and from the get go. Or if you hear someone, if you tune into what they're saying, go and try that out. But, don't expect that you're going to find a therapist like you're going to find, going to get a, a bag of onions from the market. I like to
Yeah.
say that a therapist is like a shoe. If one don't fit, we go and get another one. We don't stop wearing shoes for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that's a great point, Vinay. And on that note, I want to thank you. I think it's been excellent, even for me personally, to listen to some of these insights. And I know we both watched the movie together, but now I'm understanding in a lot more nuance after having spoken with you. And I'm sure many of our listeners who've seen Dear Zindagi, I would encourage you to go watch it again, and try and understand, try and look at these characters and their journeys through some of these points that were discussed, and also more importantly, be open to seeking help, and not always try and convince yourself that I am okay. That might not always be the truth. So thank you, Vinay, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I'll see you all on the next episode.